Hi there, listeners. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us for another week with StarCast Podcast, where we talk all things wellness and related to the business of wellness. These are trying times. There's a lot going on in the world. I've lost track of how many wars are happening. I feel like every morning there's another one started somewhere. And it reminds us that how much resilience we need to get through life right now. And so today's guest is a perfect person to talk about resilience. I'm happy to be joined by Kay Pennington from the UK. She is the founder of Resilience and Power, which is a coaching, consulting, motivating company, but she has many years of experience in the beauty and spa industry. So thanks again for joining us, Kay.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you for having me. It's great to reconnect with yourself again as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, Kay, you have been in beauty a long time. Could you walk us through your career journey? Like, when did you decide, oh, I think I want to be in the beauty industry? How did that happen?
Yeah, it came very authentically. I gravitated towards it naturally. I was raised by my grandmother as a young girl, and having that female environment, I think, turned my head towards the importance of self-care. And from a very young age, I found myself working doing work experience in salons, washing hair, brushing up, tea and coffee, hearing conversations. Most of those were women, but feeling really inspired to see the results of how self-care elevated these women. And it was almost like their jacket that they would put on, when they walked out, it elevated them. But also, along with that became the beauty element. The salon had a therapist performing facials, and I was just obsessed with this therapist and all of her creams and all of the knowledge she had about ingredients, and most of all, how it made her feel to deliver that treatment, that service. And I just thought, yes, this makes me feel happy. This is what I want to do. So that's where it began.
How old were you at that point?
I was 14.
Mm-hmm. That's so often the way it happens as a young woman. You're just opened onto that world of beauty, which is so fun. I had similarly, my mother wasn't into her appearance that much, where she spent hours putting on creams and doing makeup. So when I first saw that, I thought, oh, this is fascinating. This is a fascinating world. That's so funny. It's just whatever you're not exposed to that you sometimes seem to be drawn to. So you decided to become a beauty therapist?
I did. I became a beauty therapist. I did the training and the qualification, and my word, did that open my eyes as well to, on a technical level, to how much knowledge you have to learn to undertake that role. And it really is a far stretch away from makeup and nail polish. It's anatomy and physiology of the skin, hair, nails. It's the 7 systems of the body, the muscular, skeletal system, everything. It was packed full of biology. And, that as well was empowering to achieve, to sign off that you understand all of that knowledge is really credible.
Very much so, and more so in Europe, honestly, than in the US. I mean, the testing, the schooling is a little bit more rigorous over there. So what happened next? When you achieved your therapy certification, what did you do?
Yes, that was quite interesting in terms of the what next, because by the time I got to 18 and I was qualified, immediately that entrepreneurial ambition came in, and I knew I wanted to get out there, and I wanted to do my own work. I wanted to stand on my own 2 feet. So I actually rented a salon and I performed my own treatments in a private treatment room. But then you get the scratch, and at 19, I was reading magazines because back in those days, Lisa, there was no internet, there was
No internet, right.
no, and so every job that was advertised was all on the back of an industry magazine that I used to subscribe to called Professional Beauty. And they used to have all these pictures of all these glamorous hotels, which had spas in them. And there would be the advert for the cruise ships. And I would look at this back page of this magazine and be like, wow, I want to be part of that world. I want to travel. I want to see places and I want to use my career to do that. So at 19, that was the beginning of my spa industry story because I was very fortunate to get a job in a spa in Scotland, which is obviously north of England, and it was that was the key to the door. That was the key to the door because that then took me up a level or two into the spa industry work in the world, and I was one of the first therapists in the whole of the United Kingdom, in fact globally, to train with LMS. um LMS was just beginning then. Noella Gabrielle, I'm not sure if you know, the co-founder, was creating this spa brand, and I was one of the first therapists that she trained to be an ambassador for that skincare line, which today is global. So that was amazing. And then following on from that, my taste buds, were really, enjoying this flavor of the spa industry, the wellness sector, but also that ambition to see the world just wasn't going to end. So again, I then applied to work for Virgin Atlantic Airlines, which is obviously owned by Richard Branson. And again, I was fortunate enough to fight my way through the hundreds of applicants with the trade tests to become one of his first class in-flight beauty therapists. So that was the entry really for me in the spa and wellness industry.
So I'm fascinated by that. Tell us more about what an in-flight beauty therapist does, because I never was on a flight that had that.
It's pretty amazing. It's an area that you have within the first class compartment of the flight. So it's exclusive for first class passengers. There is a tiny area that you are allocated to perform a set of 5 or 6 services that all include massage mostly. And obviously, because it is in the air, thousands of feet in the air, you can't use flammables. So most of it is acupressure and massage, which is obviously very welcomed for people who've been traveling long distance, but also for those guests who feel, they want to incorporate wellness into their travel. We used to have lots of SAS military, politicians, quite stressful work, and coming onto these flights, it was a release for them to have a treatment, a service, but also from a luxury level, you'd have guests who'd saved all of their lives to fly first class, and then incorporating that experience was magical for them as well. So it was quite unique. It was very hard, long hours and hard work, but it was really rewarding because you were connecting with so many people from all over the world that spoke all different languages, and the language didn't matter because the talking wasn't relevant. It was all about the touch, and it was all about, it was all about the delivery of that wellness. So that was quite remarkable. And it really educated me on, it doesn't matter sometimes what you say, it's how you make someone feel.
Hmm. Did you have like a room or a curtain, or did you do it in the seat? How were the logistics of that?
Yeah, so the seat was one of those. So there was a little area if you were doing hand treatments, you could you could pull out a table. It was very well designed in terms of you could adapt the area. You could change it up to whatever treatment. So if you were doing a hand service, then manicure, then you would fold a very small table and sit across. But then if you were doing a massage, you would um, apply your massage chair so that the guest leaned forward and you would work on the back. There wasn't a curtain. It was very open. So, you had 54 passengers in that area, but most of the time, with the long haul flights, when the services were taking place, guests would often be sleeping. So it'd be during the night. So it was very chilled, very calm. The lighting was very low. And it was, yeah, it worked. Everybody could see you working, but respected the space as well. So
Amazing. Do they still offer that?
no, I don't believe they do anymore. They closed that service, but there are other airlines that offer it now. So it is available on others.
So you started traveling, and what happened next?
I started to see the world. I started to see cultures. I started to, again, take that ambition level to new heights. I embraced what I learned. I embraced the cultures. I also embraced change, dramatic change, because every 4 weeks you were issued a rota, and that rota would be not the same as the one before. You didn't know where you were going or where you were going to be. It was almost, exciting, but also sometimes quite daunting to think, oh my gosh, how many trips? Where am I going to go? How long am I going to be away from home? How long am I going to be traveling? But it was the lottery. And I think that's, again, I know we're going to tap into it a little bit later, but that was my early stages of managing resilience, because, you could either allow that work ethic to throw you off piste because it was so unstable, or you could just you lean into it, and so, yeah, it was really interesting, lots of learnings, and I appreciated every single piece of it. Yeah.
So you eventually came back to land and started on the sales side, if I'm correct.
So obviously entering into my 20s, life, you know, is part of life and not all just work. And I also decided that I wanted, and excuse the pun, but I wanted to start grounding myself back home in the UK to actually start looking at a career that was more long term, because obviously that career wasn't my plan long term. So I was wanting to take on some new challenges, and I ended up being involved with a great company in the UK called Ellison's. And Ellison's in the UK are the biggest supplier of all beauty salons and spas in the UK for all of their day-to-day consumables. They've been, I think there's something like 80 years old. No, sorry, 100 years old last year. They celebrated their centenary, and some amazing people work in that environment. But what they were looking for is they were looking for somebody to go out and visit their salons and clinics and demonstrate how products work, how machines and face tools, and offer information, help people set up in business. So it was a whole new job description and a whole new role. And I thought, wow, that actually sounds quite exciting, because it's a big area to cover. I think it was like 28 postcodes in the northwest of England. And it was dynamic. It was bouncy. It was, an open book. So, again, I did that for a large number of years. I think it was 8 years. And then following on from that, I was approached by an American brand who were launching a game changer into the UK. And it did change the game in the UK in the manicure world. And it was the first gel polish to be launched. And that was CND Shellac. I worked for an amazing company in the UK called Sweet Squared, with Samuel and Samantha Sweet, who I hold dearly in my heart forever, because they also educated me with, how to be triumphant, how to reach your goals, how to manage expectations for yourself, how to be a team player, how to go on your own. They were very, very amazing. They were amazing to work for. And then shortly after doing all this work out in the industry, out in the field, I became really close to a particular individual who was a group spa manager. And she was retiring, and she said, I actually really feel that you could be great for this role in operations because you seem to know so much about this business and you're passionate and you're confident. And I feel like the teams would really like you. And that was really important to her because she wanted the connection. So at the time, it was quite overwhelming, but I went for it and I got the role. And then there was another 8 years of success and challenge working in operations. So it's really been a pinball. My career has been a pinball of all different experiences.
So that company was Aquasana, correct?
Yes.
And you went into management of multiple units, not just one unit. And from not having done it, which is amazing, how many spas were there under your purview?
So six locations across UK and Ireland. When I first joined the business, there was 4, but one had just launched. It was a new one. And then obviously to make it 5. And then there was one that we built in Ireland, which again was such a fantastic experience to see a spa being built from the spade in the ground to the multi-million reveal that it was. So it was an extremely valuable experience for me in my career.
How many people worked under you at that job at Aquasana and Center Parks?
Yeah, so it was a big, clunky machine and very process driven in a positive way in terms of structure. So there were in total, if you look at everybody that are the components of each spa, from the cleaners, the laundry, to therapists, managers, assistants, you'd be looking in the region of around 800
That's a lot
individuals.
of people.
It is a lot of people to steer and influence. And it was powerful. It was a powerful role to be in. It was an overwhelming role to be in. And it was extremely successful as well. In the time that I was in lead, we won 22 awards in the space of
Amazing.
8 years. So it really did highlight, to me what leadership is really all about.
So what made you decide to put that aside, Kay, and focus on something more down to earth, as it were?
Yeah. So being honest and true, I reflected. One day I reflected, and reflection is one of my top 3, by the way, when we come to it later on. But reflection is key because before you can keep looking at where you're going, you need to reflect on where you've been. And you need to look at those goals, and you need to understand also your values. And I felt like after the 8 years of success, there was that, as humans, we ask ourselves, well, what is next? Where am I going? What's going to happen? And it was such a fulfilling time that I really reflected on the journey and the learnings, and tried to look at my own strengths and where my enjoyment was and where my success really did come from within that whole realm of activity. And through that piece of work, I discovered that it was all about the connection and it was all about the leadership. That was my personal strengths. It wasn't the facility that I was in front of. It wasn't the awards that we were winning. It wasn't the high caliber, guest scores, the reviews, the TV ads or whatever. It wasn't anything about that. And it wasn't even the status. It was the enjoyment and the real happiness for me was the connection in the team. But I realized that a lot of that was from me. It was from what I was doing. I was never told to do that in my job description. And it made me realize that this was something I was doing that was unique. And many other spa operator friends that I still have today, I would have conversations with, and they say, "How are you doing this? How are you winning these awards? What is it? How do you manage?" And that's often a statement that comes out a lot anyway in this day and age. How do you manage? And so it made me think, okay, so here I am in this stage of the life that I'm in. What is it I want for the future, and what do I want to give back to the industry that I adore most because it's part of me as a person. And that's when I decided to take a step back and write my programs called Resilience and Power, because what I discovered was that at no point in my whole career journey had anybody stopped. And aside from saying, okay, here is a new job description, here is a new salary, here is a new company car, here is a new status. What do you need to develop yourself to flow and grow into that next role? It felt very much here's your job description, here's your new job contract, sign, woof, and away we go. And thank goodness 8 years is a great time to survive. But what I often see out there is, we talk about it a lot. We talk about burnout, we talk about anxiety, we talk about overwhelm. And I felt all of those things during my career. I've always felt them. But through my own personal resilience, I've managed to overcome at every stage. However, there are people that don't. And it's sad to see that people then feel dissatisfied, unconfident, and then just fall off and they disappear and they lose themselves. And if only they'd have had that little piece of resilience training, if they had the tools, if they had a little bit of time for themselves just to go, well, what is it about me that makes me special? I'm going to stick with that. Would that make a difference? So that's where resilience and power comes in, because it's the tools to help individuals to find their own personal strength, to put the corporate company on the business strategy and all of the weight of others' expectations aside, and just tune into who you are and what you know you're good at and what you can achieve.
Well, that's a fascinating story. And you make a great point about the advancements, right? Or the accolades. You get awards and you get a new title. And it's like a thing that you put on without maybe being ready on the inside, to do it. And so I give you credit for noticing there was a disconnect there between the things you were being labeled with on the outside and maybe how you were feeling on the inside, and that you decided to dive into that. And the use of that word resilience is really good. What made you choose that word?
Because it's okay. So when we talk about success, and people will always use the term success as a headline, but success is, well, it's 1% talent and it's 99% keep going. That's resilience. It's about, similar to running a marathon, the end. The end is the goal, to finish, to get to the end. And, along that track, along that journey, there are obstacles. They may be mental, they may be physical, but it doesn't matter who you are. You as a human, you're going to feel it all. But it's the keeping going that gets you to the success, that gets you the medal in your hand.
It's a really good point to focus on, because as we grow in our careers and up the leadership ladder, sometimes you're so focused on the company and the identity and the values of the company that you kind of lose yourself in that mix. And you mix that tendency, and many women in our industry, it's, heavily women, sometimes young women who don't always have like core experiences to draw on. And then you look at the fact that our industry, spa and wellness, is growing so fast that there's a demand for people. And so it seems like this is a good recipe for leaders to sort of become lost in the mix of all of that.
Absolutely. I think you said the word identity, and you also, you know, translated back as well to the moments where in a big role, you've got a big role, you've got a big status. What does that mean? What does that mean to people? And I often found myself airing a little bit of frustration at the time because I'm Kay Pennington and I'm in a room with all of these amazing spa and wellness people and whoever they are. But it shouldn't be about your status and what your role is. It's about who you are. It's about your values. It's about your purpose. And what I see in particular at this moment, looking around the room, when I go to networking events, is I see fear. I see judgment, and I see that there are individuals out there who they are. It's like a hiding behind the status and the role, and they're sometimes not seen or heard for who they actually are. Because then, when they do decide to change role into change company or change their status, it's almost like then their identity is taken away because everybody's thinking, well, we didn't think you were that person. We thought you were that person. And there's a lot of stigma. And what I'm trying to say is, for me to jump out of my existing role into my new business was, I would say, a shock to everybody else more than anything. And it was managing their emotions and their judgment that was probably more challenging than my own, because I feel comfortable with who I am and what I do. It doesn't matter what job role I have or what status or what brand I'm working for. I'm always going to have the same passion. I'm always going to have the same energy. And that's what we need to see more of in our industry.
So that requires what we would say being authentic, right? And knowing yourself and being authentic to that self and not losing yourself in the role or the title that you're given. But that's easier said than done, right, Kay? I mean, how do people figure out where is the line between what is my identity and what is the identity of my job? How do you determine where that is?
Yeah. And this is, again, comes from my personal experiences and learnings where at certain parts in your career, we all chase rainbows, as it says, we all chase rainbows. We all want to go after the gold, and there's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes we get a little bit blindsided on who we're doing it for. Is it to get accolades and accreditation and to be seen in the limelight, or is it because I really want to do it? Does it really make me happy? And you see this a lot in sales. Because I've done sales and operations, you see it a lot in salespeople where they're desperately trying to reach that goal, to hit the targets, to satisfy the sales manager, to be at the top, be in the top three, salespeople of the year or whatever. But actually, they're exhausted. They're burnt out. They're not even thinking about the right journey plan, the time management. They're not thinking about how that's fitting into their personal lives to squeeze in their own wellness. Not that you should have to squeeze in wellness, but everything suddenly gets chaotic. And these are the moments where businesses really need to focus on workshops like Resilience and Power, because it's an opportunity to be able to stop and ask your people, what is it you enjoy? What are your values? What is your purpose? Why are you doing this? What do you think you're good at? Let me tell you what I think you're good at, and let me tell you how I think you're performing on an authentic level and what value you bring to my business. These are the conversations we should be having, not just here's a scoreboard or a spreadsheet and you're only as good as your last month of sales. There's a lot more to it than that. And I do have concerns because there are people out there that are neglecting their own wellness in the wellness industry, and it shouldn't be the case with the technology and the tools that we have available.
It's very true. We talk about wellness all day, but do we all live it? I know many, many colleagues in consulting and operations who are working very hard, especially right now, more so since COVID than ever. And is that wellness, right? I mean, you do have to draw the line, but it's difficult to develop a comfort level with what's coming ahead because as we know, we don't know the future. And so you're caught in that tension between, oh yes, but it's busy now, and then seeing to yourself and to your own needs. I think as you mature, you hopefully find a space for that, but I hope that you're helping people arrive at that at a younger age.
Absolutely. And the younger age is certainly a target market for me, which is why I like to work with beauty therapy level because, if you can understand that your career journey is not going to be a straight line, no matter what company you work for, no matter how safe you feel in this moment, things can change. And you said COVID is a great example, but also when you work in the corporate world, it's not your business strategy, it's somebody else's, and that strategy is often dominated by other investors, and movements can change really quickly, and you can be spat out of a machine and left to feel very unloved um one day and very uncapable, and then in a little bit of a black cloud to wonder, well, what's left for me now? And this is why it's really important to come back to yourself in all of this along the journey, so that if something does happen, that where the rug is pulled and you didn't see what was next, you've got a little bit of armor. You've got a little bit of armor just to go, it's okay. I think I've got some tools on how I need to deal with this, so it doesn't railroad you and completely, um, remove you from focusing on your career.
So, in your business, Resilience and Power, you run workshops to help leaders discover their strength and confidence. Do you have sort of a framework or a routine that you work in and you walk people through? And can you describe it for us?
Yeah, sure. There's different variations of workshops depending on the audience because you can't communicate with a corporate leader the same as you can with perhaps a beauty therapist or a senior beauty therapist because they're on different journeys, they have different values. But there are some key principles that do flow through all of my workshops. So, one of them is to, again, timeline, in whatever stage you are at, number one is timeline your career. Look at so far where you've been. How did you get there? What challenges did you overcome? When did you feel fear? And how do you feel now that you've overcome it? Tap into some of those superpowers that you have. Is it patience? Is it communication? Is it, what is it that is starting to reveal itself as your strengths at this stage? And that can be, again, for everyone. I think before we look at, as humans, we always look at, what do I need? What do I want? How can I gain? What haven't I got? But stop all that. Just have a look at the journey where you've been and learn from that. So reflection is number one. I'd say that another one is really start to understand your behaviors as a person, as an individual. Start to understand, there's tools out there such as personality profiles. There's the leadership styles if you're in a leadership role, but start to look at what kind of personality you have and how that then is translated into your role. And before you get to sit in front of your manager or whoever it is that's going to check, do your check-in, own it for yourself and do your own SWOT analysis and know where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are, what the opportunity is, and when you feel threatened. Because if you can get to understand that from a very early stage in your journey, that will set you up to be a good leader, because then you will also identify it in others. So you will respect different behaviors. And then the third one, always, that underpins through every workshop, is values. What is it you value and why? Because when we see conflict in the workplace, or when we see people leave, it's often because they didn't feel respected, or they didn't feel trusted, or they didn't feel they could communicate and be seen and heard. So what are your values? Why do you value it? And how are you going to communicate that to your employers? Because if they see what your values are and respect and understand them, then they can also understand more about you and your strengths and how you can potentially grow in their organization.
So, step one, we reflect back on the journey that we've had and the things we've learned from it. Step two, we assess where we are now. And step three is diving into the values. That's always a tough one, I think. And I like to do these group exercises as well. But, you might have a list of 50 values and they're all good. Like, there's not a bad one. So how do you get people to choose among the vast array of options, like which are most important to them? How does a person really understand how to drill down and make that choice about which value really represents who I am as a person?
Yeah, I love the way you've tapped into this a bit further, because it's such a great question. And this simply comes down to what I call the circle of power. So, this is one of my signature sessions that I do with resilience and power. And it's all about, okay, so you've got all this stuff. Like you said, we have lots of values. We worry about things working and things not working. And, you know, lots of things keep us up at night that we value. However, we have to focus on only what we can control. So then that really whittles the list down to a much smaller component of maybe your top five values. They are the things that you are in control of. If you're not in control of it, then it's not that important right now. Just move it to us and focus on where you have the power to drive that change. If it's not working, you have the power to make it purposeful. You have the power to drive something to grow. If it's in your domain, focus on that.
That makes sense. Now, so you're the leader of whatever, a group of three, a group of 30, and you have your value system. Do you have any recommendations for just daily practices of keeping that front and center and making sure that you as the leader have done what you need to do to keep your energy for your team? I think many leaders put off their own needs in favor of others. And, we know the saying, you have to buckle your seatbelt in the airplane before you help others, right? Or the oxygen mask. How do you recommend that leaders go about keeping that present?
Yeah, it comes back to always the foundation of everything is trust and connection. Because if you're not trusting, if you're not connecting, i.e. communicating, then you can't simply go through, you know, weeks or months of not actually asking the question. So I think communication strategies are another part of my workshops when I'm dealing with leaders. Is how are you communicating with your people? Is it visual? Is it one-to-one? Is it group? And this is where the cliche comes in, because you do have a lot of organizations say, oh, well, we just put on a team build, last month, and we've got a team build every 6 months or every whatever quarter of the year. But a team build is only as good as the coach home. Once the coach arrives in the car park, then it's pretty much over, because those conversations, on the bus or whilst doing an activity are not going to have longevity. because it's going to be back to the drawing board on Monday. It's going to be back to people hiding behind screens. So it's how you use your communication strategy to ensure that, it's not just a memo that's emailed around and from the boss. It's continuous communication, it's continuous connection, it's allowing people to talk about what they love, be seen and heard is the key to build trust then. And know that if, you need to keep an open door to allow people to have a place to share their thoughts as well. It's really, really important. And it doesn't just have to be a team build. It's far from it, but there's different ways that we can communicate now more than ever. We don't have any excuses now not to
That's
communicate.
true. We have so many tools at our disposal. You make a great point, Kay, about the difference between team building and leadership development. And you're right. It's easy for a company to do a team building exercise. They're fun. Maybe you just go bowling or you have a party in a park and you do something fun together. And there's value to that, no doubt. People get to know each other. I think it's fun when you maybe have competitions and you get on teams and you rely on each other. And those are all great things, but they are not the same as leadership development. And you're right. Businesses don't invest as much as they should in that, taking those few people. You're not going to do a leadership development course for 50 people on your staff, but maybe you pick five, who have aspirations or the skill set and you focus on those. I think in beauty and in wellness, we really need to grow our leaders from inside. And we're not always doing a good job at setting the foundation for that. Yes, they know their KPIs, but again, circling back to your tapping into your value system and how to translate that into the workplace is not something people are being taught.
Absolutely. It's almost completely missed. It's non-existent. It feels. Do you remember? I'm not sure if you remember as a kid growing up, but you used to have the thing called Magna Sketch, where
Yeah,
you draw and then you would either shake it and it would disappear,
you're
or
right.
you swipe it. And it feels like sometimes this is what happens um in the workplace is we get a short, sharp moment on a team build to tap into something where we feel we can possibly get close to our senior, or, feel we can raise our voice about something. But then because it's just one day and it's a team build, then it's shut down, it's gone. In fact, it's disappeared. And then I'm just back to Kay sitting behind this visor again. And oh, I'll just hang on, and then it never actually happens.
Do you have any advice for someone who's stepping into a new leadership position and is uncertain about their own identity and values?
Yeah, I do. I think really try and focus on as much emotional intelligence as you can. I think because we are now, yeah, we've got so many more cultural generation gaps. We have so many layers, if you like, to get through than ever before. The world is changing, the spa industry is moving. We are in more of a competitive space than we've ever been. And it's really about holding your own, hold your own, know your values, stick to your purpose, communicate. And I think they are the building blocks for any leader. Don't feel ashamed or shy to be vulnerable and share your imperfections, because actually it's human behavior. We like to see imperfections. We like to see people imperfectly perfect, if that makes sense. It's what makes us feel comfortable. It's what makes us feel we can respect. It's what makes us feel safe. Because we feel there's an openness and a window to have a little trip and a slip up, but it's okay because you can pull it back and you've got another chance. It's not the end of the world if you make a mistake. So be open and honest and enjoy doing it. Enjoy doing that as well at the same time.
That's a great point. I mean, making the mistake is how you learn, right? Everyone makes mistakes. The mistake is doing it a second time, right? So you make a mistake, you own up to it, and then you don't do it again. You learn from that. That's how we grow. I'm thinking about how it is at the gym when it's really hard to lift a weight and they say if your muscles are shaking, you're doing it right? Because it should be difficult, but you get through that and on to the next one. I think your point about authenticity is good. And let's segue from that into emotion in the workplace. Because that's something coming from corporate that often isn't encouraged, right? Business, poker face, not being emotional. But our industry is full of emotion, and not just because we're highly female, just because we're very authentic people, and we don't walk around in, starched up suits and being stiff. But do you think it's important that emotion is present in the workplace, or is there like a happy medium between having it and not having it?
My side of the camp is in our industry, spa, wellness, beauty industry, it is absolutely high up the Richter scale because we are our industry is emotionally driven. It's all about connection, it's about touch, it's about making people feel good, and we can't do that unless we feel good. And if we aren't allowed to emotionally charge business strategy, then it's very empty and it's very wooden, if that makes sense. And once I had the experience of being in a business strategy meeting, and I was told to take the emotion out of it, but I struggled to digest that comment because when you are transcending wellness and your teams are creating touch and you're hitting thousands and thousands of humans with your spa experiences, you have to be emotionally charged. You have to have a heartbeat, that I call it, and without a heartbeat none of it matters. And you can go into the most prestigious facility that has multi-millions of pounds spent on it, that has the latest technology in spa experiences, heat jets, thermal thalassotherapy, whatever you want to throw at it. It doesn't matter what is in that facility unless there is a heartbeat of emotion. And for me, that's what drives a successful business. It's what drives successful teams. And it's how we now in the future need to be wired to thrive in the future.
Emotion is really our product, right? When people come to a spa, they're looking for some release, stress relief, time for themselves. It's not a thing you just take off the shelf and put in a bag and go out with after you pay at the till, right? I mean, it's feeling, and we can't govern our our staffs without emotion and feeling when that's the product that we deliver. I just think it's difficult to find the middle ground because we know, both of us, that when you let too much emotion into the workplace, that can sway the other way. And we've seen it in spas when you have a lot of therapists who have very particular needs, and we give in to that, the business maybe doesn't benefit. So I think that's a challenge of walking that line between authentic and emotion being present, but the business needs being seen to.
Yeah, and that taps into, again, my workshops, because if you offer and you open up pockets of personal development time to empty the emotion that perhaps isn't desirable in the workplace, to deal with some of those issues that are preventing maximum output, then you can dissolve some of this emotion and focus on the positive and focus on the purpose, and you can engineer it to create positive results. But if you just ignore it and shut it down and pretend it's not happening and tell people to keep it to one side, then that isn't healthy either. And then that's where you see destructs, you see dysfunctional retention scores, and you genuinely see low morale and no heartbeat.
That's really excellent advice, Kay. I mean, I always say to owners and managers that that emotion in your staff is like a little steam valve, and it needs to be released regularly or it builds up until it blows up. So those sit downs, hey, hand on the shoulder, are you okay today? I noticed you seem a little tense. Letting people have those opportunities to share really does help steady the ship in the long run, right? So, two last questions. The first one, if someone listening is feeling burned out or disconnected from themselves, what advice do you have on how to get back to yourself? Maybe it's outside of work. What things do you do to kind of get back to who you are?
Okay, so first of all, on the individual, ask yourself why. Get the pen, get the paper, and write it down, because until you have explored the why, it's all in your head, and it's all that whirling emotion, and it's, whether it be physical emotion or just all pent up. You need to really look into the why. And I think, again, this is another tool that I have, is to help individuals understand the why, because if you have been keeping things up inside for so long, sometimes you forget and you think it's, oh, I'm just stressed, or, oh, I'm just, unhappy, but actually there might be something else that's happening for you that could be resolved. You just need to really understand the why. So what is it that's making me unhappy, but why? Um, what is it I'm doing that I enjoy, and why? So what am I not doing at the moment, and I'm not satisfied, and why? What's going to make me feel better? What is my purpose, and how is my day meeting that purpose? And then we can start to drill into things like boundaries and things, and what I say, what's pulling you and what's pushing you. Let's look at that seesaw of where your energy is being spent and what we need to do to lighten the load. Personally, you asked me what I do. I've always been a girl to take myself off into nature, have a walk, have a talk with myself. Loneliness is good for me, believe it or not. I enjoy my own space, and I think that because that's a therapist in me, the old therapist, where you've been connecting, you've been giving, emotionally giving all day to guests, or in a leadership role, you give to your team. For me, to go into my own circle of power is where I find my strength. And it really is like a sieving exercise, where I put everything into the sieve and I go out running, or I go for a walk, or I just have some time alone, and I find the answers. That's my personal way. And then once I've done that, I hit the, okay, now I know what I need to do in terms of my action plan to communicate.
I think the important thing is finding what works for you, right? I mean, I love hearing what you do. Everyone's different, but we need to set that time, right? To just pull back from the identity of me, the role of me at work, into the me who is the human part. And what is it that floats your boat? I mean, some people haven't had taken the time to find out what that is. And it's so important and to your enjoyment as being human, to have moments that you enjoy. So that's really good advice. My last question for you, Kay. What message would you most like the spa and wellness industry to hear right now? What do you think is important?
Okay, I'm really passionate about this, but it's just statement. It's a statement that I feel, needs to be seen and heard. And that is, explore the ways to trust and connect with your people. Listen, to their values as well as communicating yours. And if you can gather a sense of emotional connection between what you want to happen in your business and your organization, and what your people are doing it for, that in itself, with the trust and connection, will build amazing resilience. Because then when 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years later, change happens, whether it be in your control or not, you have a team of people that really trust you and that really want to be in your camp and that will back you and be behind you, because they know that you have got the time for them and you have empowered them. And it's very simple, but that's how it works. So that would be my final piece of, if you can, look at those strategies. If you're doing it already, then great. If you're not, then, maybe I can help, but that be my piece of information.
Beautifully said. We're leading teams of people, emotional beings. We're touching our guests who are emotional beings, and we can't lose sight of that. Be true to ourselves. Obviously, meet the business needs, but yeah, be authentic, be real, and hopefully reach out to Kay Pennington at Resilience and Power if you need help for your own team. Kay, great words of wisdom today, and thank you so much for joining us on Starcast.
Thank you very much for having me.